Really what I'm here to do is talk about, could you be left behind, and the relevance of that to you. Now that I've got all of the warnings and the drab pieces out, let me move on to the good news. And there's loads of good news. You see, despite all of the talk, all of the analysis, and the futurists and all of those who talk about business, the essence of business has not changed in thousands of years. In thousands of years. And I'm going to explain why. Firstly, the way I analyze business, it's in two particular ways. I take a business and I look and say, that's the sector you're in. So whether you're an accountant, a widget maker, a solicitor, social media strategist, whatever it is, that's the sector you were in. What are you selling? You're selling knowledge. You're selling the knowledge of what you know and the experience you bring to that sector, and then packaging it in a way that makes sense for your particular audience. And we all know if you do that correctly, then you'll be successful. And if it's not making you a multimillionaire, we need to keep working at it. If I was a multimillionaire, I'd be delivering this talk from a yacht in the Caribbean. So even I haven't worked it out yet. But what I'm saying is, we all sell knowledge. That's the simplicity of the whole thing, whether you're a widget maker or not. If you're a widget maker, it's about how do we make those widgets? How do we package them? How do we sell them? We have a knowledge around that, so let's make it relevant to an audience who want to buy it. So that's one side of it. The other side, which I particularly love, is what I call the business of being in business. And this is common to you as solopreneurs. It's as common to multinational organizations. What do I mean by that? Every business operation needs certain dynamics, needs certain information to help it succeed. But we can't all do it ourselves. So, for example, at its most basic level, you probably need an accountant. So you'll employ an accountant. You might need somebody in HR, like Vivian, who has a stand over there, if you're taking on employees and need to keep them contracts and manage them properly and retain them. You might need legal services. You might need marketing. You might need design. We all need it. The difference between being a small business and being a multinational is that multinationals just buy the best. They can afford it and they set up their own departments. And so they take that information and use it to drive themselves forward. So there's a strategy behind it. Just actually as an aside, my son, who worked for a multinational for many years, set up his own business about 2 years ago. And he had an IT problem. And his first thought was, who do I call to sort it? Because when he worked in business, he just picked up a phone and had it done. As an entrepreneur for himself, he had to work it out for himself. So I said, son, welcome to the reality of being an entrepreneur. And he did. So anyway, I want to take you back, now that you understand the basis where I'm coming from, just dissecting the business. And by the way, if you're buying these services, you should always buy the best. And there's a reason for that. Let me take you back to 1995. Now, I'm looking around the audience here, there's only a few of us who can kind of relate to that in a way. Thanks, Frank. But that's only a generation ago. And at that time, I ran one of the biggest design and branding agencies in the country. It was very, very successful at the time. And a lot of our clients wanted a beginning to end service, you know, from front to end service. And part of that was all around brochures. So we would design the brochures. Then we would hand the files to a middle section called origination. Now, if you haven't heard about origination, you're going to understand why in a minute. And then that went on to being printed. Fantastic. That was the sequence, that's how you did it. But it was this section in the center. They'd been around for decades. They managed to take electronic files, they integrated them with photographs, text, and all the bits and pieces that you want, then turned it into film, then turned it into plates, and then gave it to a printer to print. Needn't take it to all the technical, but that's the broad strokes of it. Hundreds and hundreds of people employed just in Dublin alone doing this. A very, very lucrative business, a business that required a huge amount of investment in technology. 1995, Drupa. Drupa is the world's biggest printing exhibition in the world. And at that, AGFA launched its new service, computer to plate. And what that did was, it took that center section and just removed it straight away. So people like us could go from here to here in one fell swoop at a much reduced cost. Now, we weren't big buyers of this particular service, but to give you an example, we were spending $100,000 a year on this service. Suddenly that wasn't relevant anymore to us. If I had been at Drupa that year and I was in the origination business, I would hope that when I saw that, I would have hopped on a plane, came home and made arrangements for the sale of the business as quickly as possible to get all my money back. And I'm sure some people did. But what happened was, over the course of the next 3 to 4 years, a tsunami just washed across the whole origination business. Companies that I knew, employing hundreds of people, had been around for decades, literally just got wiped off the face of the planet. They were no longer relevant to the industry. They were no longer relevant to anybody around. Some pivoted into digital printing, but most of them were just gone. And the equipment that was worth, in some cases, millions, was worth zero. What makes that relevant to you is the pace of life is continually changing. And if you're not staying abreast of what's going on in your sector, and that's all you're being asked to focus on, what is happening in your sector? How do you get information that feeds into giving you knowledge about upcoming changes? Now, I'm not suggesting that you have to spend a huge amount of time, but have you a plan in place to maybe review your sector, maybe to see podcasts, maybe to attend the odd exhibition? The fact that you're at an exhibition here means you're open-minded to having a look around to see what's new. That's a great start. Have a look to see how you're being impacted. Because like these origination houses, if you don't have this knowledge, you could be left behind. Last year, as part of what I do as a coach, I was asked by a charitable organization who are very much interested in helping and assisting startup businesses to get on their journey. And a lot of us do this. We don't charge for it, it's just part of what you do. It's part of giving in business. And you all know, you probably all do it yourself in some fashion or other. But it was around about July of last year, and I kind of noticed the people I was getting to help were not right. And when I mean not right, I don't mean there was anything strangely wrong with them. It's just they were at the wrong stage of their business development. In fact, some of them didn't even know what they were selling. So I brought this to the attention of the program manager and said, you need to have a look at what's going on here. And I'd love to meet the chair of the board and we can sit down and have a chat about this. So she arranged it, and in the first week of January of this year, we sat down in a coffee shop and we had a chat. The chairman of the board is a retired businessman, a very successful businessman. And when we talked through the whole situation, what I was saying is correct. He recognized that what was happening was that they had a strategic plan, created it in July of 2017. Actually, that was out of date. Now, it was only a 3-year plan, but it was out of date. It wasn't fit for purpose. So I suggested to him, why don't I meet with you and the board members, just do a facilitated workshop around what the plan is, what's changed, and how you just start creating a new one, because it's due to be renewed this year, in July. That's a good idea, Alec, he said. I'll come back to you next week. But he said, I'm not the ultimate decision maker. It has to go in front of a board. I said, that's fine. Next week they came back. And I'm fascinated because you do see this all around, so it is quite relevant in terms of business. The board are made up of experienced retired business people. So they know it. They've been around the block before. But the change of pace in life, I don't think they grasped just yet. What they said was, Alec, come back to us in July when the plan has expired and we'll start a new one off. Now, the first thought came to my mind was, if that had been a 5-year or 10-year plan, would they be saying to come back in another 2 years or 8 years' time? Possibly. I don't know. But what the key point was, they were being left behind because they had a rigid plan that was not flexible enough to change with the current times and with the information that was being fed into them. The plan was now irrelevant. And I suppose, could you be left behind because you're working to a strategy, working to a plan that hasn't changed with the information that's coming into you? Have you even reviewed what you're doing to see if it's relevant to where your marketplace is? So you can see where we're going with this. We're feeding into the amount of information. And it's mainly about planning, because I'm afraid planning for business is one of those things a lot of businesses don't do. Actually, I was on the way over here this morning. I was looking out. It's a lovely bright day, but it's quite cold out there. And it actually reminded me of meeting up with a managing director of a successful professional services firm back in November of 2017. And he had called me in. The business seemed to be doing well. It had a good reputation. It had about 40 employees. So I was kind of, when I'd known him for a number of years, and I was saying, hey, James, why have you got me in here? He said, we're losing staff at a regular rate. Okay, I know it's difficult to recruit staff, but you have a good reputation. I said, no, we get around to bringing them in, but I'm kind of wondering why they're leaving us, because we're running a fantastic organization here. So I said, okay, let's at a starting point, let's have a look at what you're actually doing. And I said, I'm going to meet some of your key people. We'll go out for coffee, have a chat. Just tell me what you're doing well, what could be better, how would you manage that? And we did. And it was like peeling an onion. We went back layer after layer. And sure enough, he was right. They had great people, dedicated people, loyal people who really wanted to help them go on. But the problem was him. He was running at 100 miles an hour and never stopped. He also expected everybody to be running at 100 miles an hour. In fact, he's one of those people who probably met himself on the way into work as he went home. That's the type of person he was. So we had a look at the situation. I said, by the way, let's have a look at the plan you have. And we talk about strategic planning. And strategic planning can be just a simple route map. But people get confused and kind of make it quite convoluted. For example, if I asked any one of you to take a busload of people, we'll call those employees, and take them to Donegal from here, I've already heard the feedback initially from them when we met over these coffees. You're just reinforcing that. So what I did was, I said to him, come back when you're ready. He hasn't. I'm glad, because he's not ready yet. What's even worse is we identified one key member that was going to leave in about 6 months' time if he didn't change his ways. He said to me, that person is the most important person in this organization. So I said, what are you going to do? I'm going to rectify it. He didn't, and they left. And the company is still in chaos as a result of that decision. What I'm not saying here is how brilliant Alec is. What I'm saying is, there's no point in bringing in outside help to your business and then not using it. That's like getting a dog and barking yourself. Don't do that. It just absolutely doesn't make sense. So really what I'm saying to you is this: you could be left behind if you bring in experts, but then don't take the advice. It's a waste of money, it's a waste of everything. Really what I want to do is just to wrap up. I've said on 3 things. I'm going to show you 3 ways that you could be left behind. The first one is about not staying abreast of the sector that you're in, the technology that's changing, and just knowing what's going on because it's important for you. The second one is adhering to plans that are no longer relevant. Don't stick to plans. Make them work for you. They're flexible. 3-year plan doesn't mean a 3-year plan. It could be a 5-year, it could be 6 months. Make it relevant to your business. And the final thing too, if you're going to bring in experts to take advice and counsel from them, don't ignore them. The reason you got them there. Just as I wrap up here, for those of you who would like to know more, over a coffee, because I'm around here this morning, I'm only too happy to have a chat with you over a coffee. If you bring me a business card with an X on the back of it, I'll arrange to meet you for a coffee if it's not convenient today. There's a sheet over here if you want to subscribe to a newsletter, or if you want to meet, I'm only happy to do it, and there's a business card there. Listen, thank you very much for listening. I'm Alec Drew. Thank you very much and enjoy the show. Thank you.